From time to time, we get comments and questions concerning the physical appearance of our members in published photos and videos. Some of these missives are from those who are genuinely uninformed, confused, or curious. Some are from trolls because every population of primates contains a significant proportion of baboons who like to fling excrement at their fellows, and human primates are sadly no exception. Regardless of the motivation, the question usually takes the same form. Why is it, we are asked, that our athletes do not sport bulging muscles and extremely low body fat? Why, in other words, don't they look like bodybuilders? At one level, the answer is of course very simple. We're not bodybuilders. We don't train for bulging biceps and ripped abs. We don't talk about being ripped or jacked. We don't slather on brown paint, and we don't prance about in thongs or bikinis to show off half-star physiques trained more to look strong than to be strong. That's just not stuff we do. Or haven't you noticed? At another level, though, things are a bit more subtle and complex. Our mission is to describe and deliver a powerful exercise medicine directed against a complex syndrome that I call the sick aging phenotype. Said syndrome being a rather technical and extensive subject beyond the scope of this video, worthy of an entire book. On the other hand, the exercise medicine itself, its formulation, its therapeutic targets, its route of administration and dosing parameters, also mandates detailed, evidence-based deliberations indicative of book-length exploration. Fortunately, and as some of you may be aware, such a book is available. It is clear from context and language that virtually none of our interlocutors who are confused or feigning confusion on the point at issue have bothered to actually read this book and educate themselves on our position. To do so would not necessarily secure their agreement with us, but it would help them avoid looking uninformed, daft, or boorish. People seem to care less about looking stupid than they used to. Most of you watching this have already managed, probably a long time ago, to internalize the simple idea that bodybuilding and strength training are not the same thing. I feel rather silly even saying it. The way you'd feel silly if you heard yourself explaining to a room full of adults that plants and animals are not the same thing. But apparently the distinction has been lost on some, and I'd rather light a candle than curse their darkness. So let's do this. Bodybuilding is about appearance, period. It's about building and displaying an idealized physique with massively hypertrophic muscle tissue on full display with a minimum of obscuring subcutaneous fat. Committed bodybuilding requires every bit as much discipline and hard work and attention to detail as any athletic endeavor, worthy of our respect, if not of our emulation. But unlike other physical endeavors, bodybuilding is about how one looks, not about how one performs. In a bodybuilding competition, the pose down is about as close to performance as it gets. Nobody has to show that they are actually strong, only that they look strong. Now let's be absolutely clear. There is considerable overlap between bodybuilding and strength training. Both disciplines are interested in building muscle, and bodybuilders are definitely stronger than the general population. Both disciplines use some of the same exercises, although strength trainees tend to focus on big compound barbell movements and bodybuilders tend to use exercises focused on single muscle groups with dumbbells, bands, and machines. Strength trainees will develop some muscular hypertrophy and bodybuilders will develop some strength, as a matter of course. Training approaches, exercise selection, and adaptations cross over somewhat, contributing to an unnecessary confusion. But bodybuilding is an end in itself. Developing an idealized physique is the entire point. Although the muscle hypertrophy and strength that result from bodybuilding may be helpful in life and in athletics, it is the physique that is the pursuit, not actual physical performance. Strength training, on the other hand, is focused on strength and power, often in support of other athletic goals in sports, including the most extreme sport of all, aging well. Although the muscle hypertrophy and improved body composition that result from strength training may improve the athlete's appearance, That is, his or her conformity with whatever arbitrary standard of physical beauty or looking fit happens to be culturally prevalent at the moment. It is health and physical performance in the arena of life that the athlete of aging pursues, not a look. Is this to say that bodybuilding is unhealthy? No, it can be a very healthy pursuit, although it often is not. Precocious death among bodybuilders is in the news right now, but this is one of those issues where there's lots of heat and little light. Clearly, the near-starvation diets used by competitive bodybuilders, not to mention the surfeit of weird supplements and performance-enhancing drugs, are not health-building interventions. But many non-competitive people in general population follow bodybuilding type programs that build better-looking physiques without the extremes, which comes along with some strength, some conditioning, and some mindful eating. And I would certainly rather have people doing that than nothing. In fact, I have a few athletes engaged in programs that, while not entirely physique focused, are more like bodybuilding than programs they started with some years ago. What some people might call power building or strength building. But here's the thing. These are trainees who got strong first. Having put themselves into the advanced or elite range for their demographics, they're now pursuing a more sculpted look. Physique work is not the focus in our book. It's not our focus at Greysteel, and it's not our focus in our blog posts, videos, and other media. Because physique work is not necessary for health and fitness, which is our focus. If you want to get jacked and ripped and look good naked, that's great. But I'm not your guy, except to tell you this one thing. You'll want to get strong first. That I can help you with. Everybody wants to be beautiful. I get it. I love a lean, muscled physique as much as the next guy, Michelangelo or Leonardo, say. This lean, muscled physique has been the subject of great art for millennia, and for good reason. But such art celebrates a youthful platonic ideal, not the sine qua non of beauty or health. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, a hoary old cliche if ever there was one. And it's hoary, and it's old, and it's a cliche because it's true. So let me sign off with a little story about beauty. Once upon a time, I was working a crazy shift in the emergency department when an elderly woman was delivered into my care with unexplained coma. She had been doing volunteer work at a local shelter when she collapsed. She was pallid and limp, unresponsive, diaphoretic, sweating bullets. Her skin was clammy, her eyes half-lidded, her respirations were uneven and sonorous and wet and gurgling. She looked horrible. As one does with an unexplained coma, we positioned her airway. We got suction at the bedside in case she tried to do some vomit breathing, slammed in an IV, and got a fingerstick glucose, which was so low it might as well have been 0. So I pushed an amp of dextrose into her, waited just long enough to say that I had waited just long enough, and pushed in another. And she woke right up. I loved taking care of hypoglycemia. Her husband appeared, and we got a classic story. She suffered from juvenile onset diabetes. She'd taken her insulin, but her work at the shelter had confused her routine, and she hadn't had a breakfast. I shook my finger at her and tried to frown. The point of the story is that these two people were in their 80s, and the staff and I were spellbound by them. As we got ready to move my patient out of resuscitation, we watched her, sitting straight up in the gurney with beautiful posture, holding her husband's hand, smiling, eyes sparkling. It turned out they were both very active, which I suspect played a big part of why they were alive and in love in their 80s. She did volunteer work and yoga and swimming, and he did some sort of physical training that I don't quite recall. Now, she wasn't going to win any bikini contests, and he wasn't going to be on the cover of Men's Health. They weren't jacked and ripped. They both carried a healthy amount of meat on their bones for the 9th decade, but they didn't have bulging biceps or rad quads, and they both had some belly fat and a little extra butt. I'm quite certain they didn't take semi-naked selfies to share on the Instagrams. Yet, we couldn't take our eyes off of them. It was agreed by all present. These were two of the most beautiful human beings any of us had ever seen. That was almost 20 years ago, and I will never forget how gorgeous they were. See, when you make your living fighting disease, health itself is a sort of radiant beauty, all too uncommon. At Greysteel, I am fortunate to work with similarly beautiful people, day in and day out. Some people are so enthralled to a superficial, silly, mass market image of fitness that they're unable to see that beauty. I feel sorry for them, but I'm not going to argue about it. Health and beauty is as health and beauty lives. Thanks for watching.